Thank you, Madam Chair.
Please, you have to press your button.
Of course. Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Brennan Manoakeesick, and I am the Director of Intergovernmental Relations with Manitoba, Kiiwetinoong, Okimakanak in Northern Manitoba. MKO in Northern Manitoba responded by the adoption of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples by supporting the development, introduction, and enactment of national legislation that will recognize and affirm the Declaration as a universal international human rights instrument in application with Canadian law. Manitoba, Kiiwetinoong, Okimakanak pushed for the enactment of 3 successive federal laws that were introduced by Indigenous parliamentarians in Parliament in Canada. One of the proposed national laws was introduced in 2008, very shortly after the adoption of the Declaration by the General Assembly in 2007. On December 3, 2020, Canada's Justice Minister introduced Bill C-15, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act, which reflected the laws previously proposed by Indigenous parliamentarians. Bill C-15 became law in Canada on June 21, 2021, as the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act, and also known as the UNDA in Canada. The goal of Manitoba, Kiiwetinoong, Okimakanak is to further amend Canada's national law to make the United Nations Declaration enforceable in Canada. During consideration of the UNDA, our Vice Chief, David Monias, told a Senate Standing Committee in Canada, quote, "The central objective in making the principles of UNDRIP enforceable in Canada is to turn the legal and constitutional paradigm around 180 degrees by making mining companies, forestry companies, and energy companies take Canada to court over actions taken by government to recognize, affirm, and protect Indigenous rights, instead of the current and historic paradigm in which First Nations endlessly take Canada to court for failing to take actions to recognize, affirm, and protect Indigenous rights," end quote. The approach of Manitoba, Kiiwetinoong, Okimakanak to making the United Nations Declaration enforceable in Canada is the collective co-development of policies, procedures, and laws in Canada at all levels of government. Collaborative co-development means that we identify the exact legislative change or changes that are needed. We then pick up the pen and draft these policy and legislative changes in close engagement with our First Nations and key government partners. We then seek champions in government to introduce and enact these changes. The objective is to moving forward to turn the present legal and constitutional paradigm around 180 degrees to ensure the acknowledged rights of Indigenous peoples and the meaningful exercise of these rights. MKO thanks the Madam Chair for the opportunity to make this statement.
Thank you for your statement.